Hey everyone, it's Carolyn here, the founder of Artsy Shark. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your visiting my YouTube channel. I hope that you become a subscriber. And if you like the content that you're seeing, please give us a like and that will get us shared with more people. You can count on me doing a video every week or so on the business of art. And today I'm really excited to have two very special guests with me today that I'm sure will be of great interest to you. If you are interested in perfecting your display and attracting new collectors, engaging with your audience, that is the topic today. I'd like to introduce my two special guests. First of all, Christine Regan-Davey. She's the managing director and the owner of Gallery System Art Displays. She's also a writer, a photographer, and she is a student of the creative process. Welcome, Christine. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks for having me.
And also, I have Pete Dunn with me, who is the director of marketing for Gallery System Art Displays. You know, he's married to an artist. He's the son of an artist. So boy, he's been around the creatives for his whole life. And so this has given him a lot of hands-on experience. He's also a recording and performing musician. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, Pete.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's really an honor to be talking with you today.
So I think we're going to have a really fun time today. The reason that I invited them is I have known Gallery Systems for a long time, and their company actually creates display materials. You work with museums, you work with galleries, with schools, or with individual artists who are looking for hanging systems that give them a lot of flexibility and different options, whether it's an open studio that you're giving, a pop-up space, your show booth, or elsewhere. And I'm going to put, I want you to tell me a little bit more about your company, but I am going to put the link to gallerysystem.com in the description of this video. It'll be a live link, so please do visit them. And Pete, you're the marketing director, so you want to give me 2 sentences about Gallery System. What do you really specialize in and who needs you?
Well, what we try to do is make it easy for people to create effective displays and do it quickly and conveniently. And it's a simple thing. It's a rail that goes on the wall. You have little hangers that slide along, and there's a set of hooks on there that you adjust very quickly. So if you want to position a painting or a group of paintings or photos or whatever, it makes it very fast and easy to get them exactly the way you want. And you can adjust them an inch or a couple inches, and it takes all the hassle out of putting nails in the wall and adjusting things.
That's what I love about it, is whenever I put something on the wall, then I want to move it over a couple of inches. So,
yeah, just that little bit, right?
I'm hammering nails, and this is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So,
and I would add to that, Carolyn, just, you know, we talk about this internally, like, you know, basically what we sell is hardware and lighting, right? Nothing that sounds very sexy, but we're so fortunate because we get a front row seat to see how so many different artists, art organizations, and museums put their works on display and why they're putting them on display, right? And it's such a fascinating place to be.
That is exactly what I want to talk about today. Now, here's the one thing I know about hanging art, that it's lighting, and more lighting. It's very, very important. And you do offer lighting. But I want to jump into this conversation immediately with Pete. You have you've got a page to share about the awareness funnel. How do people get to know about your art? How do you attract them and how do you engage them? So if you want to share a little bit about that, I know you've got some collateral. Let's take a look. And if you want to explain this, why is this important to artists and how does this work?
Well, this is a commonly used marketing visualization. The idea is that whatever you happen to be offering to the public, when you start out, nobody knows who you are. They haven't heard of you. They don't know what you're offering. And It only seems fair, honestly. I mean, marketers have been borrowing skills and capabilities from artists for a long time. So it seems only fair that artists should be able to borrow some of the capabilities from marketing in exchange. And the idea is that the first step in whatever the outcome you want, obviously a lot of people, you want to sell your work, or maybe you want to find collaborators, or maybe you want to find a gallery owner who wants to show your work, or whatever it is. There's a lot of good outcomes that can occur by connecting with people, and art fairs, open studios are a perfect place to do that, because there's the people who come to those are interested in art, and they're interested in discovering new, artists in their community generally. And the first step towards any of those outcomes is to take someone from that zone where they're unaware, never heard of you, and they have their eye caught by what you're showing. So that first step, that catching the eye, is, that's where it all starts. That's where all those good outcomes spring from. And so we'll talk a little bit today about how to do that, how to create that first impression. And then it's almost as important that once they're interested, once they say, oh, gee, that's cool, and they approach your display, you want to give them a next step, that second step to really engage and enter your space. And it sort of gets into this concept of what we talked about earlier. Why are you showing this? What are you doing? What's going on here? And we like to talk about what story are you trying to tell? And the whole thing, one of the things I've learned in marketing is that the easier and clearer you make that path of discovery, the better you'll do. It just, people like a simple, direct, easy thing. And, Christina and I talk a lot about this whole thing of what story are you trying to tell?
Yeah.
So we certainly tell verbal stories and written stories as artists, which is so important with our art. But we're talking about telling a visual story here.
Yep.
Yeah.
No words needed yet, but you're catching the eye because a display is up. Someone is walking down the aisle, or they're coming near your studio, and something is catching their eye. And that is a very deliberate placement of art. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. And I think, this idea of the funnel, and because it comes from the marketing world, can seem a little intimidating, right? But it's, if you take it always back to the storytelling aspect, which is something that, many artists are very familiar with, right? You simplify the process and think really about, this can also be thought of as like your book cover, right? What is the thing that's going to make you pick up the book and want to learn more, is that first image. And so, Pete, I don't know if we want to move into that image. I know we have an example of that.
Yeah, let's take it. I love this because I think it perfectly illustrates what you're saying. I'm looking at this beautiful abstract on the right-hand side, and that would be a wonderful book cover. I mean, if you're looking for a book to read, an arresting title might cause you to pick it up. But as we look at art, you're going to put a very strong piece at the start. And can you maybe say, I know that you didn't place this piece, this was a gallery, but what might have caused this gallery owner to select this particular piece?
And so this piece is actually from Beacon Gallery in Boston. The owner there is Christine O'Donnell, and we've had the pleasure of working with her and developing concepts that we've shared in an ebook that Pete's developed for artists to plan displays, and whether that's in your home or in a gallery or somewhere in between. But here, you think about having a billboard item, right? And so it's the item that says, come in, take a closer look, right? That's the first step. That's what Pete was talking about at the very top of that funnel. And then from there, you want the second step, as Pete was saying, is also equally important. You want them to turn the corner and have an inviting space that feels not intimidating. We're not going to trap someone in there and not let them out till they buy a piece, that kind of thing. And if you look at the orange piece on the left-hand side of the image, on the far side of the room, that draws you through. You're going to want to look at all of those items along the right wall and then come to that orange piece. And each of those, there's ways of telling the story, deepening the engagement with the viewer, who hopefully by the time they make their way around the room will feel confident enough in your work, have enough information to say, tell me more, or engage in that actual conversation that will bind the whole engagement.
Yeah, I love that. I really see, as you go around the corner, that orange piece in the back is like a magnet, and it makes me want to walk all the way in. And then of course there's other pieces that may be smaller or different around, but now I am fully in the space and I'm going to begin looking around. And as long as I feel welcome and interested and that, everything else is great. One of the things I noticed though, as I walk right in here is you've got, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, synesthesia, abstract art and creative. So I'm seeing that title. So Pete, I think that's another important piece. If there was art there with no title, okay, but am I afraid that I'm walking into someone's hotel conference room, or am I being invited in, by signage as well, since that's quite important to appreciating art.
As artists, we know when we're creating a body of work, we know the months, years, lifetime of thought and that has gone into the work, right? And reflections and influences. But when you're presenting your work, being able to present a cohesive body of work goes back to that storytelling idea, right? And the viewer has not been along the ride with you all those years in developing that body of work. So you really need to use when you can, words to help guide. So that, and I think, Pete, we have an image of this a little bit later, what you see often in museums, right? It's a little bit of context that helps orient the viewer to what they're seeing on the wall. And it also gives them a little bit more information to start forming questions in their head. Why is this interesting to me? Oh, it's not only interesting visually, but there's something else going on behind the scenes that led to the development of this particular piece.
Yeah, I love this particular photo of the display. Pete, can you tell us a little bit about this? Because is this your wife's work?
It is, yes. My wife, Emily, had this display at an open studio a few years ago. And she, at the time, in the previous image, they had that beautiful big, 2 foot by 4 foot or whatever painting it was. And at the time, my wife was working in smaller format photo prints of oyster shells. And she found that by putting 4 of them together into this grid, that they worked together to create a nice, big, bold, eye-catching kind of billboard image. And you can't see it in the photo, but the main corridor of the building we were in was kind of off to the left here. And you could see into this group of images. And it was very successful at pulling people in from the corridor. And having that little bit of text to the left of the image allowed her to talk just a little bit about why are you taking these pictures of oyster shells and what got you started on it, and for whatever you happen to be showing. We, in talking to curators and teachers, we've found that this is part of, as we were saying, making people comfortable and giving them, because when you're seeing a new artist's work, you have to take it in, you have to learn about it. And this is a way of saying, well, I've been obsessed with the color green, or these questions about how do we see other people, or, whatever it is that you're thinking about and that's driving your work. This is a chance to give people a little bit of context about it, which helps them engage and it helps bring them into that funnel.
You know, I would imagine that there are people who will look at these, which are, I see them as abstract, although yes, they are actually photos of oyster shells, but I might not even know that. And by identifying them as oyster shells, as well as being beautiful abstract works of art, it kind of grounds me in an understanding. My right brain says, boy, these are beautiful, but my left brain says, what are these? How did you do them? And how does this relate to me? And, you know, if you may be up in New England and, you know, there's people who are fishing for oysters and catching oysters, that might be part of the culture and the lifestyle there. And they understand that, or they love oysters, or they're just intrigued and they want to tell the story of their acquisition to someone who sees what they've purchased.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The other thing about this, oh, sorry, Pete. The other thing about this image is that, as in contrast to the previous image that we were showing from the gallery, where there was one strong image, this is a compilation of images that create that billboard effect as well, you know. And so it's another way. So not everyone works on a large scale, but you can still make a statement by putting pieces together in a grouping.
And one of the interesting things, and I think particularly this was a studio building where there were probably 50 or 60 artists showing, but each in their own space. Now, a lot of times if you're at an art fair or a, you know, outdoor thing, and we have a photo of this, this is the sort of thing you might see in a situation like that. And one of the things I really notice about this setup here is that all these artists are just putting every piece out there, as many as they can, packing them in as densely as they can. And if you notice, if you run your eye along this row of displays here, there's no place for your eye to settle. You know, there's no calm, focused spot in here.
Yeah, I call that breathing room. And I personally believe you're looking at these paintings, you know, which may be wonderful, but when you stack them up like this, it actually gives a perception of being lower value.
Yeah,
Makes them look like a commodity.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, Carolyn, you know, this is the difference between, you know, when someone's going to represent you or collect you, right? They want to know that you are actually saying something with your pieces, your collective work. You're not just making pretty pictures, right? Like there's that difference. And I think when you take the time to tell your story by being deliberate about how you roll out your pieces, how you invite someone into your story, I think that says, you know, your story, you know what you're trying to do, and you're inviting someone to engage in that conversation with you. Whereas you could be very talented and have the most beautiful pieces, but if they just are one piece after another, they have less meaning.
So would you recommend, if someone is going to set up, and let's say they're on the street, okay? Here we are on the street, that they do the best they can to make their display look like a gallery?
That's an interesting question. I think using the principles, you know, your space, right? You gotta work with the space you have, but you can not stack three pieces 3 deep on a you know, against a rack, right? You can be very deliberate in what you show, and allow someone to have that same experience of give them a place for their eye to rest, then give them another second place to go. Give them some context, whether it's, you know, whether it's a brochure nearby or something that's, you know, able to be affixed near the piece, where it gives, because a lot of times people also want to take something because they're going and they're absorbing, right? Their day is about going to see as many artists as they can. And at the end of the day, they're going to reflect on who they saw, and what's going to stick with them is the pieces that had, you know, almost keep it simple, right? The singular story.
You know, interestingly enough, and then I want to jump to you, Pete. I was at an art fair just 3 days ago, and I walked into a booth and the artist had some pieces, and I said, "Is this everything you have?" And she said, "No, I have a few more pieces in the back." There's nothing wrong with having inventory set aside, having a beautiful display up, and then if someone's interested enough to keep looking, that becomes a very intimate view. Like, I'm showing you what no one else has seen. And then you really start shopping. This is the piece I want. It's like opening a box, what's new. And I think that gives people an excellent opportunity to make the sale because they're giving kind of a private viewing.
And see, that's a perfect point, Carol, that it's that whole sequence. And you don't go from someone being unaware to that intimate, connected moment instantly. There has to be that first catching the eye, drawing them in, saying, oh, this is the story. The real story is not about this, but it's about this bigger question or consideration. And then you get to that. And that's exactly it. If you can have that clear path, through those stages, that's exactly what. And actually here, this was sort of the second step at my wife's oyster shell exhibit. After you saw that group, that we saw in the previous image, if you turn to your right, you'd see this little, and you can see that the wall isn't one big wall. There's a group of three, another group of three, and a group of two. And that created little sort of, just what you're saying, that sort of sense of a private little viewing area. And having the sofa and chairs and snacks there made it inviting for people to settle in, maybe have a conversation, and create just exactly that experience you're talking about.
Yeah. And what I appreciate about this, what I thought Emily did here was so brilliant, was the fact that you have the white wall and then you have the brown behind the images themselves, so it makes them pop out. And it's creating that breathing space, and it's also paying attention to, okay, you have a nice wide white mat on a neutral colored print on a white wall. You need something to give it that depth, right?
So, yeah, this is a brilliant idea, because if they were simply on white, it might almost blend into the background. So I imagine the background color is very important if you're considering the wall color that you're going to be placing a piece of art on. Do you want it? Sometimes art can be on a similar colored wall and it looks great. Because it's a red wall and you've got red in the painting or whatever. But other times you have something soft like this that really needs to be allowed to stand out by gifting it that background that shows it off. And this is this just butcher paper, or what is?
Yeah, it was just, brown craft paper. And we just, put it up there, and I think we stapled or taped it or whatever.
Yeah. And these kinds of techniques, you can apply to, if you're participating in an open studio that's in your community where people are going from home studio to home studio, you can get creative in your own home, right? I've seen some artists do some fabulous things where you walk into their living room and it looks like a gallery, right? Because they've paid attention to those details of how someone's walking in and what they're going to see first, and making sure that everything presents well.
And again, if anyone is interested in a little more detail on this, we have this ebook, Everyone's Guide to Art Hanging, and there's a whole chapter in there on preparing for open studios or home studio displays, and it's got a bunch of good photos that can be, and it's free.
Yeah, I love that. I actually it's like in a PDF format, the guide. I saw it and I actually offered it to my readers, and it was extremely popular. I think the guide gives you so many great ideas, because everything from walking into it, where's the anchor piece, or where's that billboard to invite you in, or what if your space is different and you don't have that front wall? How might you place things? And whether it's in a row like this or 2 over 2, or even in a salon style. And I want to ask about a salon style setup. This is interesting. I don't know if you have an image of the different layouts, but this is interesting.
Yeah. This is a museum show, and people are always attracted to images of people. I mean, it's sort of a deep, psychological thing in us. And so this was their billboard, the picture of the man and woman. That sort of caught people's eye as they were passing through the galleries and drawing them into down the row there to the rest of the exhibit. So this is that same principle, but the salon style, This is a photo that one of our customers shared with us. You can see she's using the hanging system mounted up at the top of the wall there. And she's got, you know, like a lot of us, she has a very compact little studio without a lot of square footage, but she very nicely uses the salon style approach to get, you know, a number of her works up on the wall. And you can see that she's placed the larger ones higher and the smaller ones lower, which makes sense because the larger ones are farther away, so you can still see them even though they're higher up. And then the lower ones create that more intimate connection that you have. Um, and our friend, our customer here said that this actually was one of her most successful open studios she'd ever had. She sold
Mm.
more pieces than she was accustomed to selling. And it was a very effective technique for her. And again, as Christine said, every display space is different. They all have limitations. They all have issues that you have to work around. And she did a very nice job of adapting to the space and the works that she had to show.
Yeah.
Christine, do you have any additional tips for salon style? I mean, I've seen I've seen groupings. It could be going up a stairway. It could be
Yeah.
in a lot of people, I think, in very old homes, salon style used to be very popular. Do you have any tips? I mean, for example, I'm noticing that all of the works that I can see, well, at least on the far wall, they are they all unframed or are some framed? Do you have any, what would you suggest if I were going to do a salon style setup?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think we forget about, especially in a space where if you have taller ceilings, like a lot of times you'll have studios in old mill buildings that have very long, tall walls, is that you can allow pieces at the very top to tilt forward a little bit. And then as you get down, have them be more flush with the wall. But it's an important thing to think about. And actually in very old, in traditional salon style hanging where you had starting with picture rail molding, the pieces at the higher heights would tilt forward for easier viewing.
Mhm.
I've also find it, like if you go to like the New York Public Library or some other places where they have, these grand old buildings, you'll often see that and you pay attention to, it's a sensibility of paying attention to what is your viewer seeing from your viewer's perspective, right? So those are things that I think about. And I think just, taking a step back when you're thinking about whether it's salon style or whether you're doing it in a sequence or more of a linear kind of approach to drawing someone into your space, it really begins with the artist thinking about being open to that conversation, right? And really excited to have that conversation with their viewer when they get there. And that's something that, if you go from, like, if you go to an open studio experience and you go from studio to studio, you can tell the difference between the artists who are, hey, come talk to me and here's my stuff, and that sort of feeling intimidated by it. And it often shows in how the artist chooses to display their work. The folks that are not so sure about showing their work sometimes the crowding of the art is a protection measure for them, right?
Yeah,
But to be
I find
successful,
it very interesting. Pete, you showed us a series, and obviously they were either hung as a grid 2/2 or as a longer series that kind of drew the eye down the wall. And those are all related works of art, and yet we're seeing unrelated works of art here also successfully shown as a grouping. So it's interesting how you can make a choice to do a series or you can combine pieces. Do you think it takes a real eye to be able to say what goes where, or do you include that in your instructions on how to successfully hang displays? What do you think about that? If someone was going to do their first salon style like this?
Well, it's a really fun process, honestly, and we have a whole chapter in our book about groupings and salon style hanging. And again, there's no rules. I mean, this is, as one of our wonderful collaborators said, this is art. Why would you want rules? And
Right.
so, but it's almost like a form of composition. It's like a visual composition of its own. And we have a picture of a gallery at the Smithsonian, the Renwick Gallery there.
Mhm.
And it's a salon style thing. And what they've got is on one wall, they have an equestrian portrait. It's like a portrait of some, big noble person on their horse. And then surrounding that, what they've done is they've got other types of portraiture, like portraits of a person in like a bower, outdoors in nature, and then others where they're just in a very form. And it's sort of commenting on what are you saying about the person you're portraying here, putting them on a horse, putting them in nature, putting them in a throne room or whatever it is. And there's just almost an infinite number of ways that you can play with that. You can have a group that's all about the color orange, or you could have one that's about angles. And we have a picture of there's a woman who is a photographer, and she has this great little grouping of 5 or 6 paintings that are all doors and windows.
Mhm.
And it becomes this commentary on, going through things and barriers and all that. And so that's where it really can be a very fun process of thinking about, well, on this wall of the salon, it'll be all about doors and windows. And then over here, it'll be about, branches and trees or whatever, and
So that's telling that story again visually.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And having a
Yeah.
theme, having something that connects things together in a way that, and that's a discovery thing for the people who are looking at it. They can sort of, oh, these are all, about orange things, aren't they? And it's again, it's part of that process of gradually drawing them into what you're thinking about and what your, visual intelligence is causing you to do.
Yeah. So that starts that conversation that you want to have with the potential collector or the collaborator or the gallery. And before we wrap, I just think there's something that you and I talked about at one point, Pete, and that is when people become aware and when they get to see your work and they walk into your space and they begin to appreciate it, and maybe that conversation starts, that's just kind of a flashpoint. That is the beginning of the relationship. The customer journey is a long one. It can be years before someone actually makes that purchase. But coming to know you and getting that first impression, which you have deliberately set up, puts you in a position to draw people in without thinking, oh, gee, how am I going to sell them? It may not be the right time to sell. Very few people buy on that first exposure, but that begins the journey. So my suggestion, and you might have some others as a marketing person, get their email, get their information, make sure you are connected and you can reach out to them again, because they're going to want to come back and re-experience the next time you show or have work available.
Yeah. If you touch them, if you are able to make that connection, they're going to follow your story, right? So they're going to, when you say, hey, and now I'm at this gallery, they're going to say, great, I want to go see that. And they're going to be all the more confident walking in the door because they already know something about your art. And that's just going to lead them down that path. So I think you're absolutely right. Engaging with them and then keeping connected, giving them more reasons to come back and have more conversation is what it's all about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a way of starting word of mouth too. If somebody becomes interested and they're talking to their friends and they say, wow, it was interesting. They had this whole wall of tree branches and again, it's a way of spreading the word and
Right.
getting the story.
Becoming memorable to people. Well,
Yeah.
this has been really wonderful. Pete, Christine, thank you so much for joining me. I think you have made so many good points in our conversation that are things for artists and others to think about when creating a display that they really want to make impact on their audience. So thank you both for joining me. I do want you to come back again. Everyone, place comments and questions in the space below, and we'll see you in the next video.